So I just read Ovid's Fasti. This is going to be a pretty short one because I don't have much to say about it. The Fasti itself is basically a calendar. It's Ovid, who, by the way, Ovid wrote this in the early 1st century. He was a very famous Roman poet, probably one of the best. He was exiled to modern-day Romania, which was quite a ways away from Rome, during the time of Augustus, and he died in the reign of Tiberius, the successor of Augustus, still in exile. And this is one of his last works. It's not finished, but it is a calendar that he wrote covering the first 6 months, so he only got about halfway through, talking about the major sort of religious festivals, rituals, rites, and things that happen on each day. It is an etiology, which that's a new word to me. It's a study on the origin of things. Now I think of the word etymology, but I guess that's word origin specifically. There's some etymology in this as well, but it is looking at all the different festivals and celebrations that the Romans had and looking at where did they come from? What's the historical or mythological context behind each of them, which makes it a very valuable resource as someone studying Roman religion and Roman myth and history. But for me, reading it, I found that I didn't get a lot of the references. I don't know enough. I'm too ignorant to read something like this. Some of the stories like Romulus and Remus, the Sabines, references to Camillus and the sack of Rome, those are things that I got because I had just read Livy, but a lot of the other stuff totally over my head. So it is written in verse. It's very poetic. I'm reading it in an English translation, so I'm not going to get a lot of the nuance. But because it's so poetic, a lot of the names of characters or gods or mythological figures are given 15 different ways. And if you don't know all the different names of these people, you're not going to make the connections and figure out who the story is about. Now, this version of the book, the Penguin Classics edition, does have about half of the book itself, the physical book, is explanation notes on the context and explaining what the actual stories of the verse are, which is the first half. Now, for me, that's very difficult, flipping back and forth. Like, do you just read all the notes first? Do you then go through and read the actual verse? I much prefer footnotes. If you're going to have things like Phoebus, he's talking about Phoebus. Wait, I got to remember who's Phoebus. Footnote, just take my eyes down to the bottom of the page. Oh, right, it's another name for Apollo. Stuff like that I would have really appreciated. But I think this is something that I should come back to, and I need to reread it once I have a deeper understanding of Greek myth and Roman myth. Or just take the time to read through the entire notes section where they explain everything, and then go back and reread the actual poem itself. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing and explain all of the different festivals and rites and history and everything. Like I said, a lot of it was references to things that I didn't fully understand, but because I am a big fan of etymology, I will go through the names of the 6 months and explain their origins, or at least the origins that Ovid proposes. I think that's interesting because we literally share these same month names, which is kind of crazy 2,000 years on. We don't have the same calendar. This is the Julian calendar. We have the Gregorian calendar, but still pretty similar. So Ovid does say that originally there had only been 10 months. At the sort of the winter period, there was nothing going on, so they didn't have a name for it. But then they had the addition of these 2 months. So the first month was originally March. If you think March is the first month, second April, May, June, July, August, and then September, the 7th month, October, the 8th month, November, the 9th month, and then December, the 10th month. So those last few are named after their numbering system, which if you look at our calendar, and you can be like, well, wait, September is not the 7th month, it's the 9th month. Well, back in the day, they didn't have these first 2 months. And also back in the day, July and August were, of course, not named after Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar because they weren't around yet. And so they would have been months 4 and 5. I don't know the actual name for them, like Tertiember and Quinquember, I don't know. Anyways, we start with January, named after Janus, a two-faced god of beginnings and ends, of doorways, marking the beginning of the year, right? Then we have February, named after the Latin word febros, meaning purification. It's the time of purification, spring cleaning, not really spring cleaning, but we're still in the middle of winter. March, kind of an obvious one, it is the month of Mars. Ovid says that, remember this had originally been the first month. It was named after Mars because Mars is Romulus's father, and Rome is a very warlike nation, so of course they're going to have their first month named after Mars. It's also the season when wars start getting underway. Things have warmed up enough, you can go out on campaign and fight your wars. Then April, which I always thought was named after Aphrodite. April, Aphrodite, there's some connection between those two names, and obviously Venus in the Roman context. But Ovid argues that it is from the Latin word aperire, which means like opening. Think of our English word aperture, an opening, and that sort of symbolizes opening of flowers and blooms and stuff which happen in April. But still, there is that connection to Venus and Aphrodite, if it was Greek, of fertility, growth, springtime, that sort of thing. Then we have May, which I think Ovid gets this one wrong, May and June. He says that May is named after Maiores, and June after juniores, like major and junior, old people and young people. So May is the month of the elderly, and June is the month of youth. June, he talks all kinds of stuff about Vesta, the Vestal Virgins, the sort of temple of Vesta, and how it's round to represent the roundness of the globe and stuff like that. In May, there was one cool part where he talked about the word lemures, which is our English word for lemur, comes from like the, I don't want to say monkeys because they're not monkeys, they're lemurs, but lemurs of Madagascar, they're called lemurs because of the Latin word lemures, which means like ghosts or spirits, because in Madagascar you don't see them, you just hear them, and it sounds like there's like spooky haunted forest, but it's actually these lemurs. The word lemures came from an older Latin word remores, that sort of R turned into an L sound, remores, lemures, and was named after the ghost of Remus. So remember Remus and Romulus? Romulus killed Remus, and so Remus, Remores, Lemures, that sort of stuff really fascinates me. There's a few other etymological things, not just ideological, but etymological things in this that are really cool, where he shows understanding of language and how language evolves and how some consonants and vowel sounds shift over time. Now, whether that's totally accurate or not, I'm not sure, but I appreciated it. And yeah, it ends in June. He never got to finish it. He died in exile, kind of a shame. I'd love to have read it in the original Latin, but it would take me like a year to refresh myself on Latin. It's been so long since I've studied it. And yeah, I think it's something I'll have to come back to once I have read more myth, and then I can get all the references and stuff, because a lot of it is allusions to different things. Like, well, this feast we have because remember when this happened, this thing happened with this person, and poetic license being very fancy and sort of oblique about how he refers to things. I found it quite challenging. But that was Fasti by Ovid.